into an overwhelming matchup like this and seeing if there are signs of maybe the next generation of Titans leaders planting their flags.
Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast live on a Friday, October the 25th. I am your host, JT Ruhnke, writer and reporter here at Broadway Sports Media. You can follow me on Twitter at JT_Ruhnke. And I'm once again joined on a Hot Read Happy Hour Friday by none other than Stoney Keeley, editor-in-chief of Sobros Network, 1/3 of Football and Other F Words, and co-writer over at stackingtheinbox.com. Stoney, how are you doing, man?
Pretty good, JT. It's been a pretty nice little end of the week. I got a new blow mold for the Halloween decoration collection. I'm going to be cooking some pumpkin stuffed jumbo shells for dinner after we hang up here. Got a trip to the Smoky Mountains in my future this weekend. I've been watching a little draft footage, getting some Ricky White III in. I'm going to watch some Wyatt Milam out of West Virginia after we're done. I'm just living my life, man. I am perfectly happy, and it's because I've accepted the fate of the 2024 Tennessee Titans. So that's something that I don't have to stress about any longer.
You certainly have. I mean, this morning, I wake up this morning and check my Twitter timeline to see that you were watching a scary movie, Terrifier.
Yes,
of all scary movies, probably one of the most gory and bloody scary movies I can think of in recent memory. And while it is in the season, and it is, we got about 5-6 days until Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
You're watching it at 9:15 in the morning. Is that just something? Is that something you do normally, or is that a byproduct of this Tennessee Titans season that kind of gives you the freedom to maybe go against the norms?
Well, I like to put movies on while I'm working.
Yeah.
And whenever, like, I'm kind of tightened out. And when I get around to Fridays, I'm usually like, man, I just kind of want to have a movie on at this point. I've heard so much Titans talk throughout the week. I'm just gonna tune out for a little bit. And my buddy Brandon and my buddy Jesse that runs Danger Zone Video out here in Mount Juliet, they just did a podcast about the Terrifier franchise. And I saw it on Tubi and was like, well, you know what? I'm going to see what all the fuss is about. Now, the major mistake that I made was having a bowl of chili for breakfast. And I'm watching a naked girl get sawed in half with a bone saw, slurping down my chili, just thinking, I kind of feel weird about this. I don't know if this was the best move. But, that's the freedom of life without the Tennessee Titans weighing you down these days.
Indeed it is. I'm glad you're following your own advice and picking up some hobbies to enjoy on a Friday here. We're going to get into a lot of different topics today. As you can see in the title, do the Tennessee Titans have their future under control? We're going to talk about some of the trades that we've seen gone down in acquiring draft picks for the Titans. Should they trade other players next couple weeks or so? Are the Titans gaslighting us? I think is another big thing that we need to discuss in more than one area, but a certain position specifically, talking about, do the Titans even stand to have a chance against the Detroit Lions, and so much more. And if you were joining us on either Twitter or Facebook, do us a favor and head on over to the Broadway Sports Media YouTube page or the 440 Sports YouTube page, where you can join people like Jake over in the chat here, where he asked his 5-step plan to fix the Titans and get their future under control. 1, fire Callahan. 2, hire Prime. 3, draft Shadur. 4, ? 5, profit. I think that's a pretty solid plan for the Titans. Wouldn't you agree, Stoney?
Yeah, there we go. I'm definitely on board with the draft Shadur and the profit. I don't know about everything else, but I like Shadur and I certainly like profit.
It's certainly out there. It's almost a absolutely wild take. And, it may just be because Jake took a little trip down to our sponsor of the show, Sinkers Beverages, the absolute best liquor store in East Nashville. They are a huge reason why we are able to continue to bring the Hot Read podcast free to you, the viewers, every single week. If you know 440, you definitely know them. But if you're new around here and haven't heard of Sinkers Beverages or Bluegrass Beverages, we are happy to introduce you. More on them later. But I think we got to get into the meat and potatoes of today and talking about, do the Titans have their future under control here? And I think the biggest part of that is, we've talked a lot about the speculation with DeAndre Hopkins and a lot of these players on expiring contracts here that could get moved at or before the deadline, because we've talked about the Titans' lack of picks going into this week, I think. Now, safe to say, that is no longer the case, as the Titans on Wednesday decided to choose violence, as it was probably one of my busier days of the week, and, decide to drop back-to-back bombs, one at 5 a.m. in the morning, so I was not even up. I wake up to just, it's kind of like the Community meme where Donald Glover just walks in with the pizzas and everything's on fire. I think that's how I woke up. That DeAndre Hopkins traded to the Kansas City Chiefs for a conditional fifth that can become a fourth, with some very interesting qualifiers there. And then certainly one that I thought came from left field, but in hindsight makes a ton of sense, I think. The Titans trade Ernest Jones to the Seattle Seahawks for a fourth-round pick and another inside linebacker in Jerome Baker. Stoney, before we dive into what this means for the Titans' future, do you have any thoughts on exactly the magnitude of these trades or anything that went down this week with the direction the Titans are going?
No, I think moving DeAndre Hopkins probably shows that this team, this franchise, kind of understands where it's at right now, and you're kind of offloading assets to gain draft capital while you still can, because like we talked about all of last season, like, don't let Derrick Henry just walk in free agency if you can get a third-round pick for him or something like that. And what ended up happening, Derrick Henry walked in free agency and the Titans got nothing for it. So I like the move to get a pick while DeAndre Hopkins still has the value. And then I think the trade of Ernest Jones IV kind of took things to a different level. And for me, it said, nobody's off the table. I thought Jones was potentially a guy that they could build around, still young.
I did too.
They could extend him at the end of the season if he were willing. Of course, that's the component of this discussion that people all too well forget, is that it's a two-way street there. So I do think he was a piece that they could have built around, but I also understand watching the tape and saying, hey, his profile, his playing style is a little too similar to what we have in Kenneth Murray. So if we can swap this for a linebacker that, albeit a little long in a tooth, little injury prone. I know the medicals were a concern when they met with him back in the summertime, but he gives you something different, more of a complement to Kenneth Murray than a duplicate of him. And you get the extra fourth-round pick. I understand the value. I understand the deal. I think that's the move for me that said, I don't think anybody's really safe. I don't think it really matters how you got here. All that matters is who's here in this moment and what can we get for them.
Yeah, and I think that sets perfectly up the Titans to maybe continue this fire sale currently where they sit right now. We've talked about, we've heard from both Chad Brinker and Rand Carthon and a lot of guys over the offseason and even into the season that this team wants draft picks. And I think that's a good thing. You look at the track record in the 2 years for, well, I guess you could call it 1.5, because how involved was Rand Carthon in his first draft class? Something that we probably will never know, but it's questionable. So I like to put it at a 1.5, really. I'll give him half credit for that one. But you look at his prowess as a guy who's able to find diamonds in the rough later in the draft, and you realize that, man, if we can get this guy just as many shots as possible in a draft, even if when we'll get into this, I'm sure for the rest of the entire season in a draft class that maybe is not as prolific as the one last year, but if you get this guy as many shots as possible in the draft, you are going to probably hit on some of those diamonds in the rough a lot better than a lot of other teams around the league. And so the Titans are currently trying to pick up some of those picks in maybe early day 3-ish area, maybe even looking to move up, because this is where the Titans currently stand in the draft. They have their first round pick. They have their second round pick. They have 2 fourths that are set in stone there. They have a conditional 5th that can become the 4th from Kansas City. And once again, that was part of the DeAndre Hopkins trade. And those conditions are that DeAndre Hopkins has to play, I believe, 60% of his snaps as a Chief, and the Chiefs have to make a Super Bowl appearance, which I think puts Titans fans between a rock and a hard place. How much do you really want to root for the Chiefs to go on their historic three-peat? But at the same time, do you want a 4th, or are you okay with the 5th? That's the dilemma I think Titans fans have to come to terms with in themselves there. So that is a 5th/a 4th. They have their 5th round pick, a 6th round pick, and a 7th round pick. It is, I think, should be noted here that they do not have their 3rd this year because they traded that to Kansas City as well for L'Jarius Sneed. And then you look at New England, actually. This is kind of a funny one. I totally forgot about this, but they did send their 2025 7th last year to acquire Nick Folk, but did get a 7th back this year from Green Bay for Malik Willis. So they are still able to keep their 7th, but 8 picks, which is, I think, just in the realm of where the sweet spot, if you will, that Rand Carthon really likes to kind of build from the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know for sure that they're done, because Brian Callahan alluded to in his media availability earlier this weekend that the roster might still be moving. So they might not be done acquiring picks for assets. Now, I think the interesting thing here is I've seen a good point made by a few people that they can also, it gives them a little fluidity in that they can kind of package these picks together to move up if there is a prospect that they're 100% dead set on that they have to have out of this draft. So they do have a little bit of flexibility in that, but I tend to think that they want the picks. They want to make the picks because they know we kind of got to churn bodies in this situation. We kind of got to get an influx of young talent at this point. You're seeing some of the older talent go on the way out, and now they're getting talent, and they're going to let the leaders emerge from it. So I completely understand it. I just wouldn't rule out any more. I wouldn't rule out any further action.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that maybe further action. But, Shrike here says, Chiefs over the Ravens. Sorry, Derek. The Titans' hatred for the Ravens still reigns supreme. And he also notes, like I said, yes, it is just an appearance in the Super Bowl. They don't have to win. They just have to go. Yep. So maybe you can try to middle your wants in your fandom there towards the end of the season. I'm
actually rooting for the Broncos now. I want
really?
Bo Nix. I want Bo Nix to go on a run in the AFC just because I was really high on him and fought a bunch of people online about Bo Nix in the draft.
That would be a very interesting story if they get in like the 8th spot. Because it feels like, quick aside on Bo Nix, it feels like one week he's like making these short passes and looking really efficient, and everybody's like, oh wow, Bo Nix, maybe they're cooking with this. And then the next week you'll just be like, how was this guy a 1st round pick? Like why was he here?
Their defense is scoring like 2 touchdowns a game to get them ahead. Yeah. It's awesome. I love watching the Broncos.
That I think that is important, though, that the Titans are not done yet. And if you were joining us live in the comments section, like so many of you are here, or if you're watching on Twitter or Facebook, you can head on over to Broadway Sports Media or 440's YouTube channel to comment and chime in as well. Who else do you think could be on the trade block and makes the most sense in this scenario, kind of where the Titans are in the 2024 season? I have a couple answers. I maybe am not as bullish on the idea that they should absolutely clean house. I do think that they still have a lot of these guys that are worth keeping around for at least the rest of the season. The biggest guy, though, for me that I think should be on the move is Quandre Diggs. As well as he's playing right now for this team, he is on that very cheap 1-year, $3 million deal that he signed with the Titans. And there are, I think, a couple teams that could use a guy like Quandre Diggs, and he would probably demand, he is on the wrong side of 30. I think he's 31, but I think, as much as with kind of what they got from Bayard last year, I feel like that's very much in the same realm of possibility that he could demand maybe a 6th or maybe even a 5th if you throw in maybe your 6th or something like that to move the pick up, not necessarily something like that. But I think I wrote about this over at Stacking the Inbox this week on a couple of guys and their projected landing spots. I think a team to look out for in the next 2-ish weeks would be maybe the Buffalo Bills, who are still rolling Taylor Rapp and DeMar Hamlin out there with just Cole Bishop behind him. That certainly seems like an opportunity with a team that is a contender that could use a veteran presence. The other guys that I wrote about, the defensive line is so tricky because, when looking back at kind of the salary numbers, it maybe makes sense for a contender to pick up a guy like Jeffrey Simmons or Harold Landry. I don't know necessarily if those are guys that you want to trade for sure. Now, granted, Harold Landry having himself kind of a career year to start this year, putting up stats along the lines of TJ Watt. Now, is it as dominant as a TJ Watt? No, but the stats are there. And can he be a rotational piece for a contender and maybe command a 3rd or even a 2nd round pick? I wouldn't hate the value there, but outside of those guys, there's not that many guys that I think, I would really want to trade right now. Boyd is another one if a team was wide receiver needy, but considering that you're down to just Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, NWI, Jaquan Jackson, and needing a couple other guys, I don't know if that makes the most sense in the world. Stoney, your thoughts on other guys who potentially could be on the move?
Yeah, the only names that I would add to that, I was Eldon's in the comments saying time to trade NWI for a 3rd. I mean, hey, listen, if you're looking for sell high,
3 receptions away from being like the 7th UDFA to have 100 receptions. I mean, he's on the cusp of UDFA wide receiver greatness right now.
Yeah, and I don't know that there's a better time to sell high. The way he's playing the last couple of games, you might be able to get something for him. I mean, do you just want to just blow the whole thing up, tear it all down? I know at one point Treylon Burks was a topic of trade discussions, and we had heard rumblings that there were a few teams that were actually kicking the tires on Treylon Burks. He's on IR now. I don't know what you could realistically get for him, but at this point, if anybody's willing to give you a pick at all, then I think I'd be entertaining.
2027 6th. Are you saying
take
yes?
Take it.
Okay. Okay.
Well, we're building this thing for a long time, right? The model is we're not going to have a full evaluation on this model for several years down the road, because I'm sure everybody's going to stay intact and keep their jobs for that long. But yeah, Burks, similar to that, as Brandon mentions in the chat, if you can get something for Chig, I'm really curious as to how this coaching staff views Chigakonkwo, because I kind of thought he would be used a little bit differently. I thought his skill set would be better leveraged in the passing game, and it's just not really coming to fruition so far. The usage to me suggests in an action speak louder than words sort of sense. Like, you can talk him up all you want to, but what are you actually doing with Chig on the field on Sundays? Makes me think that I don't know how high they really are on him. And I think he's still a really good dynamic athlete, good playmaker in the open field. Maybe somebody would give you something for him. I'd be kicking the tires on that. Another couple of names on defense, Sebastian Joseph Day. I mean, listen, if Ernest Jones IV can get gone, why not Sebastian Joseph Day? I think he's played pretty well this season, but he is a tradable asset on a short-term deal. So it's not like they're going to really eat shit if they decide to trade him. I've seen some people mention Amani Hooker, and I get it in the same vein as Harold Landry. It's an aging guy that you probably can get something now that you wouldn't be able to get for him on down the road once his play starts really petering out. But I think Amani Hooker's playing some really good ball this season, and I think, at least from the defensive standpoint, I think you still need a few pieces together to hold this thing together, because it's actually playing pretty well right now. So I'm not on the trade Amani Hooker bandwagon. And the last name I'll mention that I've seen come up a couple of times is Nick Folk, the kicker. If you think there's a team out there that is a kicker away from competing for a Super Bowl, trade him. I mean, who cares? At this point, I don't think anything's off the table. Like, we can blow this whole thing up.
I saw a clip earlier this week. I don't know where it was from, but I swear it was on one of the radio stations that somebody went on and said that they would trade Nick Folk and we're hoping to get a fifth for him and bringing back Braden Narvison. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe they need to go to our sponsors, or maybe stop going to our sponsors, Sinkers Beverages, because they might be a little too off the sauce there. But I do agree that there are some pieces. I think one also, like, what realistically, I don't think, because he's not playing well, but like, could Arden Key said, could I be next? I don't know if Arden Key. Now, I think that there's a case, even though he doesn't have the he doesn't have the stats or the production to back it up. We've kind of always said that Arden Key probably would do well to be in a more rotational role. Could he be a guy who's auditioning this week for the Detroit Lions, who could use him in a rotational role and get him in the mix there? Or is Harold Landry auditioning for the Detroit Lions this week or something like that?
Why not both?
Why not both? Exactly. Adam in the comments here, he says Charles Robinson, who's a senior NFL reporter for Yahoo, he said he thinks there's a market for Chig from what he's heard.
Interesting.
I think, man, that's a weird one to kind of put a price on. I feel like for some reason, my head screams 7th, my heart screams like 5th. But I think you're probably only getting a 7th for him, or maybe that's another scenario where you're getting a pick swap, maybe a 6th, and you're sending your 7th or something like that. That would be an interesting one. Strike in the comments, Eldon says, you think a Super Bowl team may be interested in NPF's anchor for a 2048-6? I never out of the question, but I think that does bring up the question that, they have hit the detonator here. And, this is a team that is currently selling all assets while trying to kind of maintain a semblance of competitiveness. And I think that's a great segue into, unless you have something else that you think maybe. Well,
we'll get to it, but it's the moves this week, and then this injury report is just awfully fishy to me.
Fishy, maybe signaling a 4-letter word that is an American military vehicle, something like that.
I'm not going to say it out loud, but it's, hey, it's just convenient. We're trading assets the same week that some of our brightest young stars are listed as questionable.
Yeah, I think
I don't know.
You may be onto something there, but Kenneth does bring up a question. We're not saying it, but Kenneth is in the comments here. He says, can Amy Adams stomach a tank? People think tanking is a simple plan. It's not. It takes a toll on everyone. I think that's something that the Titans are actively trying to convince themselves they're not doing, keeping the vibes high. But if it is indeed that 4-letter word that resembles a piece of American or war machinery here, I did thinking today, and what would Titans fans, with so many quarterbacks in this draft here, what is the motto that Titans fans want to kind of build hope around and surround themselves by because of all of these guys? And here's some that I've come up with. I encourage you, Stoney, to maybe throw some back at me or give me some criticism on some of these. And if people in the comments want to give their own here, Chef Rand starting us off strong, saying secure Shadur. I think that's a strong one. These are the ones that I've come up with. For Cam Ward, I've come up with collapse for Cam. A little bit of alliteration there. Mine for Shadur was stink for Shadur. I had eject for Ewers, break down for Beck. TJ saying drink at the bar for Alar. A lot of those are
I like that.
Interesting ones. Endure for Shadur is another one here in the comments. Stoney, do you have any of those really speak to you at this current juncture?
Well, I am team secure Shadur. I am. I just finished watching some more of his tape before we started recording. Got a couple of clips up on my Twitter account from the Baylor game where it went into overtime and they needed a Hail Mary to win. just gutsy, awesome stuff from Shedeur. I think he's the best pocket passer in the draft class. Frankly, where I'm at in my research now, I think he's the only guy in this class that is a lock to actually pan out in the NFL. I keep watching these other guys, and there's just mistakes, little things to clean up, issues that I just can't get over. But from a strictly marketing campaign, how does failing for Jalen sound?
Failing for Jalen. Oh, failing for Jalen. That's how.
Failing for Jalen.
Well, I don't know if I even want to consider Jalen Milroe on this team.
I don't.
What about maintain the course for Miller Moss? How does that one speak to you? Is that one?
We might have to workshop that one.
Okay.
Lost the Moss.
Yes. But I do think that, especially tomorrow, as Chef Rand brings up, that's a big time game, I think, for the Colorado Buffaloes against the Cincinnati Bearcats. UC, baby. I've maybe spent too many nights on UC's campus football field just dicking around. So maybe we'll get into those later. But you're going to have to definitely convince me to get on the Shedeur train, because I am not anywhere close to even thinking about buying my ticket. Chef, I'm not going to put that one up, but Chef Rant right there in the comments. I think that's the one for Miller Moss. Get your blank rocked for Miller Moss is a good one. All right, Stoney, let's talk about some gap that the Titans are doing right now with us. I think this is something that we've talked about as a collective recently, but it feels like with the decision to go with Jalen Duncan last week and keeping Leroy Watson inactive and everything we've heard from this Titans coaching staff, I really do feel like we're getting gaslit that we're the ones who are crazy and it's not them just rolling out a different tackle every week. And of course, I think this comes with a couple of really great clips from Bill Callahan himself. Finally, I got the chance to track him down yesterday at Thursday's practice and say, why did you play Jalen Duncan? What's going on here? And so I do want to talk about some of these clips and where I think the right tackle carousel is heading, and some of the contenders that are still here in play for the Titans. So we'll watch some of these clips and then kind of dive into that discussion. The first one that we're going to put up here is I asked Bill Callahan straight out of the gate. I said, Bill, what was the reasoning behind giving Jalen Duncan his shot this week against Buffalo? And here's what he had to say.
Jalen Duncan went through training camp and had kind of a banged up hand. So he was never really able to function at full capacity. And so we spent some time, had some downtime to get that hand right. And it was perfect. It was perfect timing. And unfortunately, he gets hurt, on the fourth, fifth play of the game. And I really feel bad for him because he was really coming along well. And, we had really thought about his progress during the OTAs and going into training camp. And we really thought he was making strides. But he just couldn't use, his right hand enough. He didn't have functionality in it, for pass pro. So we backed off and let him rest, but he kept up with everything. And like I said, it was his time to play, and unfortunately, we couldn't sustain that.
So there's a lot of reasoning why Jalen Duncan didn't exactly get his chance at the beginning of the season. I mean, it certainly feels, I really like Bill Callahan, but it really feels like they're trying to hype up a player here that simply does not have it for this team. It should be noted that also in another clip, Bill basically he stopped basically at that Jalen Duncan was going, he's now going on, he's not going to be out there for a while. So do with that.
I get what you're putting down.
Do with that information what you will, but it certainly, as it was confirmed today, will once again be the Leroy Watson show. And we have to talk about someone, in this spooky month, rising from the dead, a certain name that we haven't heard in many moons, aka like 2 weeks, rises from the ashes. And that's that John Ojukwu may be getting some play here this weekend against the Detroit Lions. Certainly feels like NPF did himself no favors in relief once again this past Sunday. And so we asked Bill also about NPF's progression and why he continues to struggle specifically with his anchor. That's the biggest thing. As you said last week, or I believe on Tuesday, when you watch the tape, it certainly just looks like he continues to get put on skates to a point where NPF just is not able to block and maintain his strength against anybody at all. And so here's what Bill Callahan had to say about NPF.
Really tried hard extensively to work all the anchor drills, try to put him in every anchor position we can. The odd angles, that he's on the edge, or maybe deep in the set. So we've worked every aspect of the anchor ability, and he's just got to get more consistent with it. It's working your feet, splaying your feet, sticking your stakes in the ground, to hold your ground. And that's something that we're consistently working. So unfortunately a couple of those haven't worked out like anybody in our league, but we just want it to be more consistent.
Do you think he's a big fella? Is it a strength issue? Is it a mentality, technique? What's the fundamental issue with him?
I think he really practices hard. He does well. When we drill, it looks good. When we're in the one-on-ones, he shows anchor ability. And then, when he gets out, a couple times, you're facing different types of rushers, different powers, and to make that adjustment versus power in the middle of the game, that's the challenge. And that's what we're looking for, guys that can make that adjustment, that can anchor down the edge, can be, it's really what we're really aiming for to improve.
Brian.
A lot of kind of sentiment there of we're trying, but it just doesn't work. Like we tried literally everything, and it just is not sticking with a guy who showed promise last year and the year before. It feels like, at this point with them bringing in Isaiah Prince, feels like if you have to kind of go back, and with John Ojukwu probably getting some run this week as well, it feels like you're pretty much admitting defeat and waving the white flag if you have to throw NPF out there. It feels like that kind of experiment has come and gone with NPF, obviously. How far we've come that, with John Ojukwu starting off as the guy in OTAs, and with the looming presence that NPF comes back, John Ojukwu continues to just keep kicking. He's hanging around. He is a cockroach. You cannot get rid of him. One more clip before we talk about, who we think really could solidify this inconsistent right tackle spot for the rest of the season here. Here is Bill Callahan on Leroy Watson's performance, what he saw from him after, I believe, the Indianapolis Colts game here. Here's what he had to say.
As a group, that the consistency in the production could be better. And I love Leroy. I think he gives a tremendous effort. He works hard. He practices hard. He's smart. He's intelligent. He just needs more experience. And we know that, going out for the first time, you're going to have your highs and lows. We're just trying to get that position to be more consistent. And I think he realizes that too. So we're at the spot where we've got a lot of candidates, competing for that spot. And we're just trying to shore up the right tackle spot, to get more production.
Where does that leave you?
I mean, I don't know about you, but that was like, it wasn't great, but it was the most positive out of the three. Like, like, it's like, we're trying to get consistency out of there, and he's done some good things. He just needs more reps. Yeah. So give him the reps. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's why I sound wild about feeling like I'm getting gaslit here. And I love Bill Callahan. I think he's an incredible coach, but I think he's been put into a very tough position where no matter what he throws out there, he's probably going to be on the wrong side of it. But it feels like you got at least a little bit of consistency out of there. And I know that there's been some talk about, maybe if Will Levis has to stay in the pocket a little bit longer than what he had to be in the Indianapolis game, would Watson's game have looked as good as it did? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think that's going to be really tested this week when he gets the start. But, and this kind of goes into the conversation here about Leroy Watson in the right tackle, I feel like you're just going to have to try to build that consistency for the rest of the season. And that really is why I think Leroy Watson is going to be your right tackle for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think a lot of that is just word salad. I mean, all due respect to Bill Callahan, he's not going to come out to the press and just be like, "Man, this guy is super shitty," and we cannot have this guy on the team anymore. He's going to try and build guys up. I get it, but it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to say, "Well, Leroy Watson just needs experience," when I think he's gotten more experience than Jalen Duncan. I think, and you went to him. And then if you want to build consistency for him, what does pulling him completely inactive the following week after starting really do to build consistency? I thought that Zach on Cover 2 on 104.5 The Zone today had a really good angle on this thing. It just kind of feels like what I've been saying, throwing shit against the wall and seeing what sticks. But the way he framed it was like, well, they're going to put NPF out there, and he doesn't have the anchor, but maybe Jalen Duncan has the anchor, so we're going to put him out there. But then you see Jalen Duncan doesn't really have the technical prowess, the footwork to hold up there against the speedy guys, so maybe we'll put Leroy in there, and maybe he'll hang in there with those guys. But no, he's getting beat too, so we go back to NPF because he's the best athlete, and maybe we've gotten the dog out of him since we benched him. And it's just this revolving door of suck, and these guys just keep getting beat. And I should clarify that I feel gaslit too, because everybody was saying, well, Leroy Watson sucked. Why would they roll with him? I did a 20-minute film study on his start, and I said, guys, I don't see, it's not great. It ain't pretty at all, but it's better than what they'd fielded prior to that in the season. You know, it's like the PFF grades came out, and I was thrilled to see that Leroy Watson had like a 42 PFF grade, because everybody else had been in the 20s and 30s. So I'm like, this looks
baby steps.
This looks on tape. This looks like the best right tackle play that we've seen all season. There's your answer. That's the light bulb going off. Let's roll with Leroy Watson. And all it was the week after was just, well, it was okay. We're going to continue to look at our options, and then they don't even dress him. And I'm looking like, what did I see on the tape that was just, there's such a disconnect between my work and their actions that like I've missed something. Am I taking crazy pills? But I'm being gaslit, because ultimately they go back to Leroy Watson because he's the most stable option that they have right now. And they're going to play John Njoku a little bit, maybe, because they've just got to keep turning these guys. And the situation sucks. They're not going to say anything mean about anybody, but it's bad. And for what it's worth, there are two people on this earth that see something in Jalen Duncan, and it's me and it's Bill Callahan, and we probably both need to be institutionalized.
Hey, you said it, not me. But I think we should start openly calling these guys cowards. Just let John Njoku play. See what happens.
I just want him to have a chance. If they put him in the game and he gets his ass handed to him, I mean, he's just absolutely folded, I will completely shut up. You will never hear about Njoku mania again. I got it. I just want the guy to get a chance. All right. That's all I'm saying. Also, to our point about being gaslit about right tackle, I think we gave it right back to the Titans. I think we've been on our shows for 2 weeks now talking about this situation, and finally they're just like, all right, you know what? We're going to start Leroy Watson, and we're going to play John Njoku, and then you guys can just shut the hell up.
And maybe we will be sat down after this. Maybe this is a put us in our place moment. But only time will tell against this Detroit Lions team. But before we get to a little bit of a preview of whatever this game will be this Sunday, have to give a massive shout out to our wonderful sponsors, Sinkers Beverages, who have been serving the East Nashville area for over 40 years. They are now a 4-time Best of Nashville Liquor Store of the Year, winning once again here in the year of our Lord and Savior 2024. Got to get out there because it simply is one of the best, if not the best, liquor stores here in Nashville. An absolutely insane selection of beers, wines, and spirits, and including anything else that you can possibly think of. THC drinks, they have an entire shelf and a half that is entirely across the entire liquor store. You got to get out there and check it out for yourself. And when you're out there, got to join their in-crowd for special benefits, allocations, and special tastings that they do, I believe, every other Friday. So maybe they'll do one tonight. I don't know. I'll have to check my email because only way you know is if you're part of the in-crowd. And also give them a follow over on your social media platform of choice at SinkersBev. And if you can't make it out there, don't worry, they have you covered because you can simply search Sinkers on Uber Eats and they deliver the booze to you because they drive so you can drink. Remember to drink responsibly. Also have to give a shout out to their sister store, Bluegrass Beverages. Hold the cup up, Stoney, who have been serving that Hendersonville area for over 50 years. I believe that's also where you guys do your draft party. Is that correct? Am I remembering that correct?
No, Zach and I did a preview show from Bluegrass.
Show. Okay.
Yeah, season preview in 2023.
Either way, a lot of Titans content coming out for you from
awesome
Sinkers
spot.
and Bluegrass Beverages. Thank you once again for sponsoring the show. All right, Stoney, before we get into this, whatever this game is, let's at least have a little bit more laughs before we have to continue to sound depressed about this Titans team. There were some other good ones here in the chat as we continue to find our slogan for the 4-letter word. I like Adams going out of left field saying a long way to go for Diego. I think that's a good one. Wherever Diego Pavia ends up, the August 18th Diego Pavia preseason game, I will be there no matter what. I will be seated watching the Diego Pavia preseason game.
I like Diego Pavia. I think he's a real dark horse in this year's running back class.
Eldon, sorry, it took me a second. All right, I see where you're coming from there. Eldon coming back here in the chat, saying bust for Nuss, fart for Dart. I think those are two really strong ones. Get boned for Jones. Very, very, very good ones here in the chat. I do think Chef Ran also brings up an interesting predicament here, where if there are two truthers in the Jalen Duncan community, it's you and Bill Callahan, and probably also the team's money, where he says, follow the money, guys. JD being a starter is the best way forward contract wise. You don't have to pay anybody else, just pay JD to go out there.
Well, I mean, man, listen, like if you were able to get something out of him and he developed into a serviceable right tackle, yeah, that's ideal, because you're talking about what, a 6th or 7th round pick.
I believe he was
Contract super manageable, and it's a position that you don't have to address next spring. Yeah,
I agree there, but the only way we're going to get to next spring is forward, and that is with a date up in Detroit against the Lions, another team that has Super Bowl aspirations on their minds. The Titans are going to have to most likely get 4 or 5 things to go their way, not just 1 or 2. They're going to need 4 or 5 things to go their way to get a win this week. They come into this game, I believe last time I checked, 11.5-point underdogs in this game. It's not very good. And I think we're probably almost likely going to put my foot down here. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I think they're going to go with Mason Rudolph once again this week. You just kind of got to follow the paper trail here and kind of listen to what they've said over the past week. The first one I want to bring up here is with Mason Rudolph, is the importance on the guy who you're most likely going to give the start to getting the important reps. That is something that did not happen last week when Will Levis tried to fight through the injury and start. Obviously, he could not go, so it was Mason Rudolph to go, and he looked like, it wasn't exactly all in sync there. And so we asked, Nick Holtz yesterday about how important is it that Mason Rudolph gets those snaps this week, and here's what he had to say.
Because last Wednesday, he didn't take they really split him and Will, and then Thursday, Will took a majority of them before we kind of decided he wasn't going to go. So for him, just seeing it more and more and more, and even though he's a veteran guy, there were definitely a couple of examples, especially on third down. You know, he ended up getting more of the third down reps. So those first couple third downs, those are the exact reps that Mason got in practice. Those translated over to the game, and then kind of as the game went on, you saw we get 60, 70 plays down the call sheet. He hadn't had as many turns in some of those, and some of them were game plan looks against Buffalo, and he hadn't gotten them all full speed because you can't get them all. So there was definitely, as the game went on in that third and fourth quarter, you saw he didn't have as many of those reps.
I really like this coaching staff for the Titans. I think that's been something that we continue to harp on about on this show here. But if the Titans were to come out and do that, like they said with Nick Holtz, and give him the starter reps, and somehow Will Levis plays this game this weekend, in which last week they looked at it and said, oh, we didn't give the guy we were going to give the ball to all the starting reps. Maybe we should do that this week, and then go back on their word this week. I may do something drastic and pull my hair out, something like that, because that is crazy talk. Even though Will Levis is listed as questionable, I don't think there's any possibility that he even dresses for this game. But I do think that it is the Mason Rudolph show, and they would do well by to continue to have him out there. A couple other guys who possibly will not go this week for the Titans. The big one, L'Jarius Sneed, as Chef Rand here talks. How worried are you about Sneed? Obviously, we heard from Brian Callahan today that he misses yet another week because when they got the scan of him and his quad, it was a little bit worse than they were expecting. So it looks like he's going to need another week. I honestly not surprised in hindsight how much, as much as Sneed is a dominant guy, we saw the Detroit Lions throw linemen out on the boundary as X receivers last week. I mean, they are not afraid to use literally anybody anywhere on the field. How much L'Jarius Sneed was really going to impact this game when they're literally making Tim Patrick look like a wide receiver one this season. I'm not worried long-term about Sneed. I think this is simply, if it was the knee, I would be certainly more concerned. But since it is a totally different injury, I feel maybe slightly better about it. Stoney, do you have any thoughts on the Sneed injury and how worried you are about it?
Well, I think I'm a little worried just because I think the issues showed up on the tape in his last game. And that was one thing people were kind of scratching their heads to figure out why L'Jarius Sneed maybe not living up to expectation so far. And the way that he kind of struggled to plant and change direction in that game kind of made me feel like there was something wrong from an injury standpoint. Like he wasn't 100%. He wasn't moving, changing direction as fluidly as he usually does. That kind of concerns me. I think hearing that it's just rest, and I go back to what I said earlier, what I insinuated earlier about the injury report, this potentially being an opportunity for the team to just say, we know what we are. Let's not get any of our major building blocks hurt, because regardless of what people are saying, I think Sneed is absolutely one of the players that this team is going to be building around for the next couple of years. I think it's the right decision to play it safe. And ultimately, I don't think I'm too worried about it, because I think just getting him healthy is the most important thing right now. And if we get back to that point and we still see the struggles, then maybe I'll start getting a little more concerned than I am right now. But it sounds to me like this is just a ultra super precautionary sort of measure. Protecting
the building blocks here is certainly something the Titans also are looking to do, because then you look at the rest of the injury report here, and a lot of guys who pop up with either limited participation or DNPs on Friday, and you can look at the names and you can probably see a trend here. First of all, the one that really doesn't fit in is Jerome Baker, who is listed as questionable, who has one limited practice as a Titan. How much run he gets this week, I don't know. But the other guys that you're looking at, Tyjae Spears, questionable. Tavon, questionable, did not participate on
Surprising.
Friday. And then Jarvis Brownlee Jr. popping up this week with a limited participation on Friday with an ankle injury. We can dive into a bunch of these here, but I think the biggest one is Jarvis Brownlee Jr. If he were not to go this week, and your secondary is made up of Roger McCreary, Darrell Baker, Trey Avery, Kenneth Murray, and Jack Gibbons. I don't know about you. I'm probably putting some coin on every single Detroit skill position player's overs, because that seems like we're going to be playing some backyard football this week in terms of coverage.
Yeah, and I think Darrell Baker Jr. has played pretty well in spots for the Titans due to the injury, but I still don't think he's a guy that you can really count on to be a number one serviceable starter in the league. He's perfect in spot play, a depth piece that I think has been pretty good, but I don't want us as Titans fans to fall into the trap that we fell into under Mike Vrabel, where we thought he could turn any pile of shit into gold. And I think being realistic about it, you're asking a lot of those two guys to go out there and hang with this Detroit offense, not just their skill position players that can win the man matchups, but Jared Goff's playing well right now. And I think he's been underrated for quite a while, but his ball placement, his accuracy has been on point. The dude is he's only missed 10 passes in the last 3 games. It's like an 85% completion percentage, like 7 touchdowns to no interceptions, averaging almost 300 yards a game. Like this is going to be a battle. And I mean, you would love to see it break the Titans' way and they could at least get Brownlee out there. But if it's not, then it could be a bloodbath. I think this is really going to test the depth in the secondary.
Bloodwork says in the comments here, Goff is underrated because people wrote him off and don't want to admit being wrong about it. I think that's certainly the case in this offense. Some might say sneaky MVP dark horse candidate right now. I mean, the way he's playing. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, if he doesn't go, you talk about Tavondre Sweat with a hip. If he doesn't go, protecting your pieces there, you're really relying on 3 guys on the defensive side of the ball, and Jeffrey Simmons, Harold Landry, and Arden Key, 3 guys who this season have not showed us that by their own they can be game wreckers. They need a couple other things to fall their way on plays to be game wreckers. You're asking a lot of a defense who has been good, but they've played 2 Super Bowl contenders the past couple weeks, and that's not going. You know, I don't think it's going to be the case once again this week. Bloodwork saying, I just hope Levis plays. Spoiler alert, he's not going to play this week.
Afraid I got some bad news.
Yeah, I got bad news for you. Should check back in with us next week against the New England Patriots, and we'll hopefully have some better news for you. But all the signs are saying that Levis will not go this week. But before we move on, Stoney, do you have any other maybe keys to this game for the Titans to have any semblance of a hope or chance in this game against the Lions? Or is it really just a week where you got to lock in and maybe just witness, maybe focus on the play of Daniel Brunskill as an extra lineman? Is that something that we should look forward to?
So regarding the matchup, and then I'll address like what there is or what I'll be looking for in this game anyway. The matchup is also against arguably the best offensive line in the NFL in the Detroit Lions. So you're asking a lot of your defensive line. You're asking a lot of your secondary. You're asking a lot of your linebackers and safeties to cover over the middle of the field because Detroit, like you've said, they have weapons. But the flip side of this is the defensive matchup for Detroit. They have 2 really good interior defensive linemen, DJ Reader and Aleem McNeil. I think they're playing pretty well. They're caving in the interiors of offensive lines. So you're going to have to get a big game from Peter Skoronski, Lloyd Cushenberry, and Dylan Radins if there's going to be any chance. And Mason Rudolph's going to have to get the ball out quickly. It's going to have to be a quick, decisive, efficient passing game if there's going to be any hope at all. But even with the throws getting down the field, Detroit plays a lot of man coverage. They play a lot of cover 1, single high safety, line up man. They've got corners that are playing pretty decently right now. They've got safeties that are playing pretty decently right now. And we saw what happened last week in the second half of the Buffalo game when the Bills switched from playing primarily zone in the first half to primarily man in the second half. Suddenly the Titans passing game didn't really look that good. There were a lot more tight window throws that Mason Rudolph either sailed or just didn't have the time to throw because the offensive line wasn't holding up. So I really look at this thing from a total standpoint, offense and defense both, as an overwhelming mismatch for the Titans. And I'm not getting my hopes up that there's going to be any signs of life in this. What I will be looking for, we've talked about leadership this week quite a bit and where the next generation of Titans leaders are going to come from. And I think you can start to see those trends born in a game like this where they're overmatched. And I'm going to be looking at the guys like Jarvis Brownlee, if he's out there, if he's playing, the guys like J.C. Latham, Peter Skoronski, the interior offensive line. Can those guys rise to the occasion? And then your guys that are going to be getting a chance in expanded roles like Jaquan Jackson. I think it's going to be watching the young guys, seeing how they respond to an overwhelming matchup like this, and seeing if there are signs of maybe the next generation of Titans leaders planting their flags in a game like this.
Yeah, you bring up a couple of good points. One, the Detroit Lions like to run man coverage in almost 40% of their snaps this year, which I think is a huge mismatch here for the Titans. But you do bring up on the other side of the ball wide receivers that are going to have to step up this week. Touchdown leader for the Titans, NWI, I think,
oh boy,
is going to have a big game, which is something you never really want to hear. There's been a lot of talk, I think, before we move on here, there's been a lot of talk about Jaquan Jackson getting an increased role. And I know myself and you and a lot of other people here have not been really impressed with what Jaquan Jackson can do or has done so far in this offense. But I think the notion that he's going to get a lot more run this week, maybe we need to pump the brakes on that, because if Jaquan Jackson is going to have to play this week, there really is no option for him, I think, in my opinion, on the outside for this team.
No.
And we've heard, and as much as the discussion today has been Jaquan Jackson playing on the outside or anything like that, we heard from Tyke Tolbert yesterday that simply is not the player he is. Tyke Tolbert said verbatim yesterday that Jaquan Jackson is an interior guy where NWI is the exterior guy. And so if you see Jaquan Jackson in this game, you probably are going to be looking at wide receiver sets where they're going to kick Tyler Boyd to the outside. Maybe not the place where he is the best option here for you to play on the outside. But still, I do think that, you know, if you want to see Jaquan Jackson in any kind of role, it's going to be with another guy on the outside. You probably could also see some more usage of Chig being used as an exterior guy if you want to get two guys in the slot on
that'd be cool
on the right side, and you want to play trips and you want to have NWI on the outside and Jaquan Jackson as the interior slot guy on the side, and Tyler Boyd in the middle of those two with Chig on the other side. I think that's an option, but there really is no path to having Jaquan Jackson be the guy while still having a guy like Tyler Boyd in the slot there. But, you know, who knows? Maybe I don't know anything. So,
yeah, I think it's an interesting prediction that you've put yourself in with trading DeAndre Hopkins, who was your primary X receiver. But then we heard in the offseason the backup X receiver is Treylon Burks, who's on IR. So now you're in a spot where who is your X receiver? Because you said NWI was the Z receiver. So no matter what happens,
Bryce Oliver, baby,
they're going to have to do some retooling.
Yeah.
And you know what? While we're at it, from where I sit, having conceded that we're now in player evaluation mode for this thing, it would take now if they go and beat the Detroit Lions and go on a run, hell, maybe we can rekindle the playoff talks, but I don't think this team's going anywhere. Yeah. I'm all for getting as many young players into the game and seeing what you got in real NFL game action. Give me some Bryce Oliver, no issue with it whatsoever.
the issue is that I think the one issue that you could maybe find is that you're going up against probably a top 3 team in the league. And so
trial by fire, baby.
Yeah, I guess so. All right. That's enough of, I wish we could go more in depth on these Titans games, but they're really, I mean, what else can we really say about
this is one of those
Titans
games that you
team?
can't. It's just, it's ugly. You check every box in favor of the Detroit Lions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, Nick Folk is as consistent of a kicker as you can get, and Ryan Stonehouse is still one of the best punters in the league. And I think
there we go.
Yeah. So, all right, let's move on to the final segment. And we're, we're running long, but we're gonna still continue to give you our best bets every week, no matter about how bad I am and how good Stoney is right now. It's got to turn around one week, maybe, or maybe everything was a fluke and I just really am this bad. And my 2-year sample size is down the drain, but we're going to continue to try to work back at it because it is a season-long contest. The season is not over, and who knows? Maybe I could go start putting some winning weeks to get here together here on the Best Bet Gauntlet. And so, with my first pick this week, you're probably already going to want to fade me, but I'm taking the Cleveland Browns with famous Jameis Winston as their quarterback, plus 8.5 against the Baltimore Ravens. Listen, this is a spot where you want to fade Lamar Jackson. He's 8 games under 500 when facing an opponent, AFC opponent with this big of a spread. This is a game where he does not live up to the moment like he does with his NFC counterparts. Also, you can just look at the difference between Deshaun Watson and a guy like Jameis Winston. 64 quarterbacks have had at least 200 plays since the start of 2022. Watson is 58th in EPA per play, 57th in success rate, 49th in CPOE, completion percentage over expected. His EPA per play mark is surrounded by Zach Wilson and everyone's favorite, Will Levis. Watson's last 300-yard game came with the Texans in January of 2021. I certainly think Jameis Winston, as average as he is better. This is another spot where I think the number is bigger than I think it should be, especially with how close these divisional games can be. And with that, even if Chef Rand thinks I am tanking in the Best Bet Gauntlet for whatever that means, I'm going to take the Browns this week plus 8.5 as my first pick.
I like it. The old quarterback change spark. I like it. I'm gonna go to the Houston Texans. They're 4.5-point favorites hosting the Indianapolis Colts. Sounds like the Colts might be going back to Anthony Richardson. I don't think that gives them the best chance to win. I think the Colts are kind of a fraud playoff team and the byproduct of a situation where, hey, somebody's got to take those last 2 wild card spots. So I'm fading the Colts big time in this spot. I think the Texans are a well-oiled machine right now. I think they're going to win this one pretty comfortably.
Yeah, I don't hate that pick at all here. Kenneth in the comments, maybe I should just start listening to Kenneth because he's certainly having a better year than me. He said he warned me about the Saquon revenge game.
He did.
We live and we learn. But this week, I'm going to once again fade. This is a perfect segue because I'm fading Saquon and the Eagles because I'm taking Cincinnati minus 2.5. I believe in the Joe Burrow bounce back game after the Browns. In his career after facing the Browns, he is 5-1-1 straight up and 6-1 against the spread in his career and 12-7-1 against the spread the game after facing an AFC North opponent in general here. I like this team who gets super pumped up to play the Browns and then comes back and is able to execute against a reeling Philadelphia Eagles team that I still don't think is that good. I think this is a Bengals team that continues to just get better and better this week. Nonetheless, I'm taking Cincinnati at home to get a win in what should be a really good game, minus 2.5. I think they win by a field goal.
Yeah, I like that one. I've actually got that one in my little parlay I've got cooked up this week, 10-legger going. I'm going to go with the New York Jets, touchdown favorites at New England. Listen, I think New England is in a similar spot to the Titans. I think it's tearing down. The walls are caving in on this franchise. They have, to steal someone on Twitter's joke that I don't remember because I don't follow the account.
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
They have a bunch of wide receiver 3s with wide receiver 1 mentalities. There's already some rumblings from that building that people aren't happy with the coach. Like it is full blown chaos. The defense was vaunted at the beginning of the season, even getting that win over your Cincinnati Bengals. It's a unit that it just looks like is hanging on by the skin of its teeth right now. And look, as bad as the Jets have been, it's another week of Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams building that chemistry, and I still think they have the pieces to run the ball and win this by 10 points. I think the Jets are going to kind of push the Patriots around in Foxborough.
Yeah, I don't hate that one whatsoever. Kind of wishing that Aaron Rodgers can get them back on track here is certainly something that's hard to stomach, but I don't hate it whatsoever. With my next pick, taking an AFC East team here, I'm going to take the Buffalo Bills -3 going to Seattle. And this is simply a play where I think the Bills are, they had their dip, but this is where they really start to take off and look like the world beaters I think they can be. Buffalo, only a 3-point favorite in this game, and they're playing a Seahawks team that has struggled to cover against the spread at home since the beginning of last season. Geno Smith is 3-8 against the spread at home, the worst mark for any active starting quarterback in the NFL. And in those 11 home games, Seattle's failing to cover the spread by 4.5 points per game. When you bet on Josh Allen, you have to know that when you're betting the spread, you're betting them to win big. I think this is just, with the addition of Amari Cooper, maybe I don't feel this way, but now that they have that bona fide X, that whether or not the Bills like it, Stephon Diggs was right, and they do need an X receiver. And with Amari Cooper now getting a full week in this system, I really like what the Bills have cooking here. And so I think they're going to win big. So I'm taking Buffalo -3.
I'm going to Jacksonville for my next pick, and I think Brian Thomas Jr., the development of Trayvon Walker have been nice developments for the Jacksonville Jaguars, but I still think this is a really bad football team. They are welcoming a Green Bay Packers team to town that is firing on all cylinders right now. This is a good, complete football team. It's really as simple as the matchup, and when you start breaking this thing down, I don't know how many matchups you check in favor of Jacksonville. This kind of feels like it's not going to be like a Lions-Titans situation, but I feel like the Packers are going to hit Jacksonville like a green wave. I don't know why I'm making two lame jokes in the best bet Gauntlet.
I think Hurricane Lou would like that one. I see his profile pictures of green wave. So.
I'm going with the Green Bay Packers -3.5 in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I don't hate that one whatsoever. With my fourth pick here in the best bet Gauntlet this week, I'm taking Miami at home, -4.5 with the return of Tua Tagovailoa this week. Listen, I know the Dolphins have not been good as of late, and that has a lot to do with the quarterback play. They are 1-8 against the spread in their last 9 games overall, dating back to last season, but this is a spot where I think you're going to see Tua come back, and you're going to get a revitalized Miami team here against Kyler Murray, who's coming off going on the road on short rest. In this spot in his career, going on the road after short rest, he is 0-2 against the spread, failing to cover by 17.5 points per game here. This is a spot where we've seen this Arizona Cardinals team be frisky against teams who can't really put up offensive production, but you see them go up against a team like maybe the game they had against the Commanders, where you see a prolific offense just able to beat the brakes off of them. And I think this is a spot where you're going to get some of that Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill regression. I know they are severely licked chops here to get after this Arizona Cardinals secondary. And so with that, I'm going to take Miami to win this game by a touchdown. I'm going to take that spread -4.5.
This might be a bit of a surprise, but I think I'm going to back the Chicago Bears at -3 at Washington this weekend. I think this is a tricky kind of matchup. I know Jaden Daniels is officially listed as questionable on the injury report, but it kind of sounds like Marcus Mariota is going to be the guy. I don't really think it matters. I don't know how many of our listeners have checked in on the Chicago Bears since that week 1 matchup against the Titans, but their defense is humming right along. Caleb Williams is starting to find his footing in the NFL. They're starting to play some really good football right now, and I would stop short of calling the Commanders frauds. I don't think they are. I think Cliff Kingsbury is doing a fantastic job. Dan Quinn's been a stabilizing force in that locker room, but I don't know that they've been battle-tested against a defense that's necessarily going to attack them, beat them up the way that the Chicago Bears will. And I think Caleb Williams continues to hit his stride, and the Bears win this one 24-20 kind of matchup.
Yeah, I that's a frisky one for sure. I don't know if I'll be telling you, but hey, I think, Marcus Mariota had that one resurgence, and we might see the more of the regular Mariota that a lot of Titans fans have become accustomed to. With my last pick here, man, this was a tough one. I just, I saw all these trends and I could not. I'm going to fade the Dallas Cowboys once again. I'm taking San Francisco -4, even without Brandon Ayuk. You just have to look at the trends with where this Cowboys team is right now. They've struggled against the spread recently. They are 3-8 against the spread in their last 11 games, tied for the worst mark for any NFL team in that span. And you look at Dak Prescott as an underdog right now. You look at his struggles as an underdog. He's 7-19 against the spread in his career, but 2-9 against the spread as an underdog in his last 11 starts since 2020. He's 4-11 against the spread as a dog. You want to hear the quarterbacks that are the only quarterbacks who are worse than him right now? Bryce Young, Gardner Minshew, Justin Fields, and Mac Jones against the spread.
Oh, damn.
You look at Dak Prescott right now in night games against San Francisco. He is 0-2 straight up and against the spread, scoring a total of 22 points in 2 games. Brock Purdy's playing serviceable, even if they don't have Debo this week. I like Jawan Jennings. I like George Kittle, and I love my boy Pretty Ricky to show out and show off
back.
this game. He's back, baby. I thought about taking the Cowboys in a close one here. However, no Micah Parsons once again for them. I just think that this San Francisco team has to turn it on eventually, and I think this is the week that they do it. I'm going to take San Francisco -4 here. And you got one more, right?
I got one more, yeah, but I was just going to say I also think Dallas just stinks. I don't think they're very good. I'm going to wrap things up going back to the Pittsburgh 5.5-point favorites hosting the New York Giants. The Giants are ass. The Steelers are one of the sicko teams of the year. I don't think people realize how good their offense is clicking right now. Hats off to Art Smith. I think he's doing a fantastic job up there, playing good defense. This is one of the more complete teams in the AFC. I don't think anybody's talking about them as the contenders that they are. They have the potential to ruin somebody's season, and I think they beat the Giants around.
Alrighty, and so that's going to do it for our Week 5 best bets. To recap here, I am taking Cleveland +8.5, Cincinnati -2.5, Buffalo -3, Miami -4.5, and San Francisco -4. 4 favorites, 1 underdog. Stoney, you're going with Houston -4.5, New York Jets -7, Green Bay -3.5, Pittsburgh -5.5, and Chicago -3. That is 9 favorites and 1 underdog this week. We'll see. Only time will tell if we're seeing the board correctly. Eldon here in the comments saying, final segment, get hammered until the Titans are just Greek gods. That's a great reminder to go get responsibly hammered until the Titans are just Greek gods over at Sinkers Beverages, our wonderful sponsor. Thank you for them for sponsoring the show. Until next Tuesday when we talk about what...
hang on.
One more thing?
If I can just get one more thing in.
Yeah.
Hingle McCringleberry in the chat says, instead of NFL, what if it was the National Freaky League? I'm going to tell you what, Leroy Watson be the MVP of that league. TGIF, y'all have a good one.
He would be the MVP of that league. And that's going to do it for us today on the Hot Read podcast. We'll be back on Tuesday to talk, whatever happens from this game that could turn out to be the National Freaky League. For Stoney Keeley, I'm JT Ruhnke. We will talk to you on Tuesday. Have a good weekend.